Hi, everybody. It is noon, so we're going to get started. My name is Ellen Stewart. I want to welcome you to this AgilePath webinar titled Legacy Portfolio Migration in the Age of Cloud Computing. Before we get started, I want to let you know a couple housekeeping items. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. After the webinar, you'll be receiving your copy of the companion white paper in your email, and the full recording of the webinar and the slides will be available on our website shortly. So with that housekeeping out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Marks, President and CEO of AgilePath, and Dennis Back, Chief Systems Engineer.
So thank you, Ellen, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. The topic is, of course, legacy portfolio modernization in the age of cloud computing. And this is a very interesting and compelling topic, one that we've spent a lot of time thinking about and analyzing. And so we appreciate your attendance. We hope you get a lot out of today's discussion. The agenda for the flow today is basically to present some background on the imperative driving legacy portfolio modernization, what some of the challenges are revolving around that. Then we'll go into some frameworks that we've refined over the years that will help perform portfolio analysis to help make decisions how to modernize and attack a legacy portfolio. And then we'll present some more details around this analysis framework, go into some of the risks involved in the legacy portfolio and how to mitigate. And then lastly, we'll talk about how we use these ideas in our technology called SOLARCloud to help address this. We'll have time for questions at the end, and we encourage you to submit questions through the webinar console. But if you have just ad hoc questions, we're happy to take those as well. So with no further ado, let's go into the legacy modernization imperative. The salient question here is, why do these portfolios persist? What's driving the need to modernize the legacy portfolio? At the end of the day, these legacy portfolios run the business of an enterprise. You know, whenever you're touching, modernizing, rationalizing the legacy portfolio, whether you want to or not, you're going to have some impact on the business, and hopefully positive rather than negative. So that's a key driver of why you need to modernize legacy applications in a proactive fashion. Of course, we all know that the legacy portfolio stifles innovation primarily due to the fact that it consumes 70 to 80% of the IT budget. Just right off the top, keeping the lights on, running the business is where 70 to 80% of the IT budget is spent. So that means that you have a whole lot less to do strategic work, innovation work, R&D within the IT organization. And furthermore, the sustainment costs of that legacy portfolio are definitely fit a long-tail distribution model where those costs stretch out into perpetuity almost, but also a lot of those costs are dominated by a few applications that if you could attack them, modernize them, kill them off, you would change the cost distribution curve substantially. We also know that another imperative behind legacy modernization is the fact that we're trying to insert new technologies to drive business innovation, a couple of issues inhibit the adoption of new technologies. That means somehow I've got to modernize business capabilities to take advantage of things like cloud computing, like mobile, like social, and other things. But without the ability to absorb and integrate these emerging technologies into the enterprise architecture, there's going to be a dampening effect on IT and business. We do know that executives are being forced into this modernization primarily to drive their cost equation, primarily to help drive new innovation, and also to just more or less survive what they've inherited. If you go back and look at how a legacy portfolio came into being, it would be an interesting exercise that would span 20 to 30 years of decision-making, some good, some bad, And, these portfolios are inherited beasts with a lot of, long-in-the-tooth applications. So in some cases, CIOs have inherited them, and now they're just trying to survive the impact of these portfolios on their ability to make decisions. So that's a lot of words around some of the forces that are driving legacy portfolio modernization imperatives. So this kind of brings us to, why do they stick around? Why do these portfolios stay around so long and seem like they're never modernized? Why does it seem like legacy applications are never retired? And this is true, by the way, across the public sector, in state, federal, and local government work, but it's also substantially true of Fortune 2000 enterprises. So one of the problems why these portfolios persist is it's very, very difficult to justify the cost to do the analysis of the application portfolio. That analysis means not only inventorying and maintaining the portfolio, but then doing the deeper dive analysis to determine what to do with various applications. And of course, that size and time it takes to do the analysis is directly proportional to the number of applications you've got there. Another reason why these portfolios persist is the fact that it's very, very difficult to justify the cost of rewriting or replatforming these legacy applications. We'll get into some of the cost-sharing issues in a slide or two, but in many cases, the rationale or the decision comes down to, do I spend money rewriting something and getting equivalent business functionality that reduces IT costs, or should I just leave it alone, as opposed to investing in something that not only modernizes it and saves IT costs, but also improves business functionality somehow. So those are some of the challenges that go into this. The third reason why legacy portfolios persist is that applications, they're running, right? They're not broken enough to justify investing in rewriting or replatforming an app, and they're not broken enough to take on the business and operational risk of messing with a functional system to date. So in many cases, there won't be the appetite to do legacy modernization unless it's a do something or else kind of up against the wall imperative. So it's not broken enough to justify the investment or justify taking on the risk. The next one down kind of talks about the fact that, again, many organizations have a difficult time justifying the investment in rewriting the app unless there's a direct improvement in the business process, the business capability, the business functionality. So if I'm not doing something for customer satisfaction, efficiency, market growth, profit margin, it's not going to get a favorable response. And then another one, and we've all lived this one as well, is the fact that let's say you've identified a set of applications in the legacy portfolio that should be, by all measures, retired or sunsetted because they have no or very few customers, but in many cases it's very difficult to get the business on board to support turning things off. And that becomes another challenge that has a lot of politics involved in it. So that's a few of the reasons why these portfolios persist and stay around. Now, this slide, the who pays, who gains dichotomy is one of the explanations that we use to explore the dynamics between IT and the business in the context of migrating and modernizing legacy applications. And it centers on the fundamental question around, who pays for the legacy modernization and who gets the benefits. And in many cases, legacy modernization efforts are pursued because there's a IT benefit. So if I replatform to a commodity infrastructure, for example, or if I migrate a legacy application into a public cloud, for example, irrespective of some of the other issues around that, mind you, IT benefits because the cost of those decisions clearly benefit IT. But the business doesn't necessarily get a functional improvement. So, again, that comes down to the decision and the interaction with the business to say, hey, we want to invest in modernizing this application. Primarily the benefits are for IT. Will you support it? The business will almost always say, well, not really, because I'm not getting any candy to go with this thing. So where's my benefit? Where's my improved performance? But at the same time, under those scenarios, the business is paying for, because business funds IT, the business is paying for a modernization effort, but the business ends up bearing all the operational risk, because if a modernization goes southbound, business performance would be impacted. So IT wins, business invests, business bears the risk. You're not going to get too much support for that. We also know the way to deal with this dichotomy. What we're trying to do is to get a clearer understanding of the partnership model between business and IT, such that even if the accrued benefits and savings of a legacy modernization are primarily IT benefits, what we're working to do is try to get the business to understand that if IT saves money, those savings accrue to the business. So the false separation of IT from the business really is truly false. IT savings result in business savings just by virtue of the fact that the business funds IT. So there is absolutely a win-win model around if the benefits are primarily IT, the business still wins because IT is part of the business. Now, it's obviously even better if there's a business functionality improvement and an IT set of benefits that go with modernization, but not in all cases will that be the case. Okay, so that explains a little bit of that IT business dynamic and the who pays, who gains dichotomy, which, again, partially explains the stickiness and the persistence of legacy portfolios. So before we go any further, I think it's important that we discuss what's a legacy application. Because if I asked everybody on the webinar and the audience today what they think is legacy, we'd get a variety of answers that range from, it's something that's really old, written in COBOL, to it's something that's not supported by the vendor. And again, those would be accurate, but we actually take a more simple definition of what's legacy. First of all, we treat with the same legacy methodology, any application that's in production is treated as a legacy application. That's how we view it. Anything that's installed and operational today, regardless of how new it is treated like a legacy app. Now, obviously the modernization efforts associated with them would be different, but that way, you know that anything that's in production, operational, is part of the legacy portfolio. Now, it's also important to expand the definition beyond just a business application, because the legacy application also includes integrations between applications. It also includes any data that are part of the applications. So, it also includes anything that's homegrown, custom developed, and commercially off-the-shelf products as well. Those are all things that are included in the legacy portfolio. So anything that's in production, regardless of how new, and the applications, the data, the integrations are all part of that landscape. That's the definition of legacy application in the context of this exercise. Now, as a first step in exploring the legacy portfolio, actually in the white paper, we had a title heading for that section called Open at Your Own Risk. It's like, you take a look at it and see what kind of a can of worms you've inherited. What we're showing is a legacy portfolio modernization curve, which is just a way that we've developed to profile and categorize the contents of the legacy portfolio. We're showing it as a normal distribution curve just because it's symmetrical and pretty on a slide. Clearly, the costs associated with this curve would be non-normal, and we could get into what that mathematics starts to look like, but that's a different white paper. But if you look at the legacy portfolio curve, it really you can take this legacy portfolio of yours and break it into the following buckets. You can look at a slice of the portfolio through analysis that basically would lead you to a decision to retire something right away because it fits a profile of none or very few customers, and that's something you can turn off right now. Through analysis, you would find a percentage of your legacy portfolio, maybe 5 to 10%, that is largely duplicative. And what I mean by largely duplicative is that you've got a set of applications that are probably 70% or greater redundant and overlapping in capability, and those would be candidates for rationalization or consolidation. And so that's another chunk of the portfolio that you should be identifying and starting to take a deeper look at. As you go further across from left to right, there's going to be a slice of the portfolio, normally around 15%, we're guessing, that it's a custom app or a old app that you could replace with an equivalent commercial off-the-shelf capability or in government off-the-shelf. But we're basically saying there's elements of the application portfolio that you can replace with a commercial off-the-shelf product today. Now, I'm going to go to the far right side of this curve, and there's a slice of your legacy portfolio, 10 to 20% anyways, that is a do-nothing status. And what I mean by do-nothing is that those are applications in your portfolio that are pretty new and where you wouldn't necessarily try to do anything with them right now. So while you might analyze them in context of doing portfolio analysis, those are applications that you know pretty much that you're not going to do anything with because they're fairly new. Now, what's important is all the rest, the big preponderance of this curve, is what we affectionately call the dangerous middle. That's a big chunk of your portfolio, probably 50 to 70% of it. And those are applications that you're not sure what the appropriate modernization strategy is. So as you can see there's a couple of choices around rewriting or refactoring them, replatforming them. You could use a couple of service-oriented architecture approaches, like do a full SOA refactoring of them. Or if you didn't want to go that heavy duty, you could just do service wrapping for the data services out of a legacy app to extend its life. Of course, you could then be thinking about, well, maybe we should virtualize this app and invest in some hypervisor platform and virtualize them preparatory to thinking about cloud migration. Or, again, you could make a choice of maybe this is back in that do-nothing category. So this is just an overall profiling of a generic legacy portfolio that you can start to think about. Now, this is just a little bit more detail around those categories I've just quickly gone through. So, again, there's the retirement option, which basically says, it's got no business value, no revenue impact. That should be killed right now. And that's easy savings that can accrue to the bottom line. The rationalize consolidate bucket, again, is all about identifying and eliminating redundant applications or capabilities. Place with COTS-GOTS is what we've talked about. The do-nothing is, we also talked about that. The dangerous middle is the category of the portfolio that has the most risk and is fraught with the most danger. We'll talk about the dangerous middle some more. Now, that generic legacy modernization curve, when I orient it toward a cloud migration model, starts to look like the picture that we're showing here. As you can see, some of the categories are the same and some are different. So when we're looking at that legacy portfolio with an intent to migrate legacy applications into a cloud, whether it's a private cloud, whether it's a public cloud, or some kind of a hybrid deployment, these are the things you'd be thinking about. So let me work this from left to right. There's our old friend, the retirement, which we've talked about. That one's fairly clear. There's another slice of the portfolio which rather than replace with a COTS-GOTS commercial equivalent, we're basically saying that you can replace that legacy application with a cloud-aware application. What we mean by cloud-aware is that there's either a SaaS-based application out there that can perform that functionality, there's a platform as a service, or some other development platform that can be used to replace that functionality. What we're suggesting is there are going to increasingly be natively cloud-architected business applications that you can start to look at as replacements for your legacy applications or parts of your legacy application portfolio. Continuing on left to right, there's a percentage of your legacy portfolio that is already virtualized. So I don't know how far along most enterprises are with the adoption of virtualization technologies. Some are more ahead than others. But what we've discovered in our engineering work and cloud architecture and implementation activities is that if you've already got an application virtualized, regardless of the hypervisor, you'll be able to migrate that application into almost all of today's commercially available clouds and start to take advantage of the infrastructure as a service savings that go along with that. So some percentage of your portfolio that's already virtualized can be immediately migrated to cloud, and you can start to reap the benefits of savings at the infrastructure services layer. Now, in the middle, in red, of course, is that dangerous middle. So there's a big dangerous middle in the cloud migration curve, and a do nothing. So what you've got to do in the context of analyzing a legacy portfolio for migration to the cloud is do a suitable analysis using a set of coarse and fine-grained approaches. What I'd like to do now is hand the baton over to Dennis Bach, our chief engineer, and he'll walk us through the analysis process of the legacy portfolio.
Yeah, as we do a deeper dive into the analysis, we really look at two different types of analysis, initially starting with a coarse-grained analysis to try and identify what bin we want to put an application in. And it's really aimed at identifying some low-hanging fruit, things that can migrate easily into a cloud environment. And for those things, primarily in the dangerous middle, the analysis is really more fine-grained. It's not obvious in doing a cursory look at the application as to what the appropriate course of action should be. So you need to dive in and do a fine-grained analysis. And for that, we've developed what we call an AgileQuad modeling technique, which helps in that decision-making process to determine the best course of action. In a coarse-grained analysis, and I'll step back for a second, the coarse-grained analysis is intended to be a set of questions that a business analyst, somebody with a minimal degree of technical knowledge can answer. And if you're wondering what a coarse-grained question might be, the sample would be for an application in your portfolio, do you have a business case to migrate? Is there really a business case, a need for it? Another question that would have to be answered is, do you have funding to support a migration project? So that's a sample of two types of questions, or two questions that would need to be answered, and they're coarse-grained in nature. You want to apply the questions to an entire legacy portfolio that you're looking at, and out of the coarse-grained analysis, you will rapidly put the applications into the different bins. That's the objective here, and identifying the more obvious migration choices, again, low-hanging fruit. The other thing that falls out of the coarse-grained analysis is to really look at those applications in your portfolio that will need a fine-grained analysis. And the fine-grained analysis really is something that is done as a team with both business experts as well as subject matter experts, because you need to be able to do a deep dive in understanding the application.
So let me just add, Dennis, before you move on, and it's really important in the context of this portfolio analysis. The coarse-grained analysis is something that can be done across every element of the portfolio in about 10 questions or less. There's essentially 10, maybe at the most 15 kinds of questions that some are generic and universal across any organization. Some might be more specific to a given enterprise. But the idea is that you can get the coarse-grained questions right. You can do a very rapid overall portfolio analysis, profile the portfolio, categorize the candidates in the portfolio, and then the ones where you can make the decision right away, where it's fairly obvious, you should immediately begin the migration and modernization efforts around those, because all that, again, has a direct bearing on how quickly you can accumulate savings to the bottom line.
Agreed. So I think one of the key things is you need to identify that legacy portfolio that is going to go into the analysis. You don't necessarily want to take every application that is in your business. You could be looking at hundreds of applications. So you want to look at a portfolio that is manageable. For those things primarily in the dangerous middle, they require, again, a more detailed, or what we call a fine-grained analysis. And to support that, AgilePath has developed what we call an AgileQuad modeling and decomposition analysis methodology. So it looks at the application and, again, applies a set of more detailed questions in a more of a decision tree format. And the number of questions could potentially be larger. I mean, it's not in the neighborhood of the 10 to 15 questions of coarse-grained, so you may be looking at 30 to 40 questions that need to be answered in a decision tree to help you identify the appropriate course of action for the application. And you may actually, in the end of this analysis, come out with a couple of options for a course of action. So then you sit down with your analysis team and decide upon the best course of action for that particular application for your organization. So you're really looking at a deep dive, looking at both the technical aspects with subject matter experts that know both the application as well as the target environment, and they need to be coupled with your business analysts to understand the business value for moving and migrating an application. Because you may end up with an analysis that says, from a technical perspective, this is difficult or risky, but from a business perspective, the payback is significant in opening up new markets, improving the overall efficiency of your organization. So there are a lot of business drivers that potentially need to be considered that override some of the technical risk. And we'll talk about risk in a few minutes here. So when you look at risks, there are a number of categories that we've listed here. You have technical risks, updating old technology. You have the delivery risks. Do you have the right skills mix within your organization, or can you acquire the right skill mix? Eric talked earlier about applications that potentially were written in COBOL. Do you have the source code? Can you do you have the expertise in-house to be able to understand what that application is doing, or are you looking at having to potentially do a functional decomposition of the application and rewrite it from scratch? Political risk. Do you have the sponsorship for a migration project? That's very important to consider. You need to have that high-level air cover and support for both the funding perspective, and when you have bumps in the road, you need to have that executive sponsorship. Organizational risk. This is an interesting one, is in that, does your organization have the ability to absorb technology? So by that we mean if you do not have the skills, the expertise in, let's say, cloud computing, your organization is going to be challenged to learn that while still maintaining the business. So again, that's a key thing that you need to be doing here is the business is still running day to day. You're still having to support the existing application base while that is in production, while you're looking at migration. You need to look at the impact on, again, this is the impact on the running business. You need to keep the business going. You can't shut down. It's not a greenfield environment where you can shut down the business for a period of time while you're supporting a migration project. And security. You need to maintain security, and these days there's a need to typically enhance your security. So as you look at moving to the cloud and adopting social media, BYOD, other technologies, security is becoming a major concern, and this is a risk. So the takeaway here is that you really need to look at the full spectrum of risks to consider those in your migration plans.
Yeah, and Dennis, let me add that political risk is one I don't hear too many organizations address, but the political risk, of course, is partially explained by the who pays, who gains dichotomy that we mentioned before, and it's also important in the context of these, risk areas that they will all have different proportional impact on legacy migration choices that you'll be making. So, for example, the retirement choice for parts of the portfolio will have a different combination of these risks associated with it, primarily political, than will a decision to replace with a commercial application. So all these risk categories will apply, but they'll be in different percentages or proportions based on the legacy choices that you're making.
Yeah, you have different weighting factors, obviously, that need to be considered as part of your fine-grained analysis. Again, some of the risk drivers for retiring an application, and retiring applications can be a very sensitive thing, especially if they're critical to your business. You've got the data criticality. You need to consider old hardware. Do you have hardware that the maintenance costs are ever increasing, that's no longer supported? Again, forcing a retirement. Unsupported application version. How many times have we heard in our careers that, oops, where's the source code? I can't find it. I can't rebuild the application. I can't rebuild my runtime environment because there's some critical component missing, the programming language that was used. We no longer have the compilers that can support it. We have an application which is undocumented. I've lost the source. I've lost the documentation. So, again, these are critical drivers. And also, I think people are seeing this that, particularly if you look at COBOL as an example, the pool of expertise that knows COBOL is retiring. So those skills are difficult to find. The more aged the program is, your application is, the more difficult it may be to find people that understand it. The key takeaway here, again, is that the longer retirement decisions are delayed, the more difficult and costly they will become. Inaction will start to cost the business and eventually could potentially do damage to the business if you have a critical application that just stops and you have these different risk factors that apply. And you should have retired it earlier. So this slide talks about relative risks based on course of action. Again, it's looking at the dangerous middle fine-grained analysis. If you look at things such as rewrite, refactor, you have H's it's a high risk all the way across. In those different categories, it's difficult to do. You have new technology, the business is impacted, operations impacted, and you have the political buy-in that you need across the organization. That's why all those things are high. At the other end of the spectrum, do nothing. Do nothing is low from a difficulty perspective because you don't have to make any investment. But your other factors here are highly variable in doing nothing. So doing nothing, you can have political pressure to do something because an application is just too aged, too costly. So all of these factors need to be considered in the risk analysis. Portfolio risk management. When you're looking at risk, again, you need to look at these different categories we put in here. You need to look at the investment, return on investment, your payback period, the probability of ROI. So this is, I think, again, one of those things that becomes interesting when you're looking at the probability of ROI. I mentioned earlier, you may have an application that the analysis says that the ROI is just not there from a business perspective, but from a technical perspective, it's just too risky not to do something. So you have to have that balance. And that also ties in with the probability of a payback period. You need to strike the right balance. And it's not just purely technical, driven by IT, and it's not just purely business, the business side of the house. So this is where, again, the AgileQuad modeling and prototyping, as we're showing, helps you refine that analysis to determine the appropriate course of action. SOLARCloud Playbook, this is something that AgilePath has created, and again, it really embodies this two-tier approach for portfolio analysis with the coarse-grained analysis, bucketizing applications, and the AgileQuad modeling and decomposition, providing the fine-grained analysis, primarily looking at the dangerous middle candidates. The goal is that this is driven by a small team of people. It's not something which you really look at putting an entire organization together. You really want to have a focus team which consists of business leads, business analysts, and subject matter experts. So subject matter experts become highly variable. They need to have knowledge of the specific application. So they're brought in by the business lead as necessary to provide the in-depth knowledge of the application that's running. And it's also you're probably looking at a small team of technical experts, because you don't necessarily have a single expert that knows the application and potentially knows the target cloud environment that you're looking at migrating to. So when you're talking about a subject matter expert, it's not necessarily a singular person, but again, it's intended to be a small team of people that are brought together looking at both the business and the technical sides. The end result, you want to develop a comprehensive migration plan for the portfolio as a whole. That needs to be aligned with the business priorities and the budget priorities. You're not necessarily going to be able to do a big bang, nor is that really the right thing to do in most cases. You want to do an iterative process. You want to create a pilot program in which you start out with the low-hanging fruit. That activity is done in parallel with the fine-grained analysis of those dangerous middle candidates, and you feed this all back into your plan, refining your migration plan as you go along. So you look at migrating some of your low-hanging fruit applications based on the experience you gain from that. You feed that back into the analysis process. So analysis at both a coarse-grained and a fine-grained level, as well as migration activity, occur in parallel.
There's actually, Dennis, if I can interject, and this is just a little history for those on the phone. The SOLARCloud methodology has benefited from our 10 years of being in business and applying legacy modernization strategies using service orientation. So we have a companion methodology that we use, which is purely using SOA, or service-oriented architecture, applied to legacy applications. That methodology was called SOLAR, Service-Oriented Legacy Asset Rationalization. What a great acronym. But then as we started applying more of these legacy modernization strategies more broadly, we realized that SOA-based modernization is only one of many modernization approaches that you would take when looking at the overall legacy portfolio. So SOLARCloud, of course, became the new name, focused on legacy migration to cloud, but it does incorporate all of the other modernization tactics that you might use, whether it's rewriting, replatforming, service enabling, replacing with commercial, or just doing nothing because the risk is too high. So thought that was relevant history to share.
That's good. That's good to point out. So we do have a lot of history. This has evolved into what we're calling now the SOLARCloud Playbook. So what's on the screen now are primarily the 5 steps at the top that you would go through in the playbook. Initially starting out left to right, developing your strategy. You need to have a migration strategy. That would include things such as timing, budget targets, cost savings that you want to accrue in looking at a migration project, because typically that's one of the goals of the migration project. So you do that and as part of your preparation. You want to look at, and I mentioned earlier, you need to identify your legacy portfolio and look at the scope of applications that you're going to include within that portfolio. We talk here about governance in the preparation. You want to have a governance model in place such that the organization as a whole, everybody that's participating in a migration project, understands their roles, responsibilities, and this needs to be developed up front. Once you have that, you then feed into the actual analysis process, doing your coarse-grained and fine-grained analysis, applying the AgileQuad decomposition to help along the way, and to look at your developing your migration plan. You want to look initially at the output of the coarse-grained analysis, and those are candidates that can proceed to the next step immediately, which is going into the cloud migration planning. Looking at how you're going to actually execute. You're performing your risk analysis at this phase. You're developing the migration roadmap and sequencing plan. So you can start that the moment you have candidate 1 identified out of the coarse-grained analysis. And then you can start your fine-grained analysis on other candidates. Once you've got your plans in place, you then push the execute button. And the key thing here is to monitor the progress. So as part of your upfront strategy and preparation, you need to identify appropriate metrics which measure and monitor success for your migration project. And once you have migrated, key thing is lessons learned. So you want to be able to capture those things that work good in the migration process. You want to identify those things that need to be improved and feed that back into your analysis, refining in particular the set of fine-grained questions that you're following as part of the analysis. So again, it's an iterative process. There's a lot of parallelism that can occur. So you can start to reap some benefit to the business very soon, looking at, in particular, the initial coarse-grained applications that fall out of that coarse-grained analysis. So don't wait. What we're saying is don't wait until you've totally analyzed your portfolio and determine what you're going to do to the entire portfolio. That's too late. You really want to start this process of migrating and learning as you go through the migration process and feeding those learnings back into the analysis process. Pretty much talked about this, I think, at this point, which is, first of all, you want to plan your project, confirm your strategy and your goals, do the coarse-grained, fine-grained analysis, decomposition, develop your modernization roadmap, and execute for your low-hanging fruit. So the graphic shows some of the process steps in more of a flow format. So this would be a sample of what would happen in a SOLARCloud engagement with AgilePath. So, Eric, you want to talk about what's next?
Yeah, so, next steps, what we've done is walk through some of the analysis insights and approaches that we've refined over the years. We've given a sense of the steps involved in using some of these techniques and applying them to a legacy portfolio modernization activity. So if there's any interest in learning more about these things, by all means, you can hit our website, send us email directly. You're certainly all going to receive the white paper that is a more detailed explanation of these approaches. And, based on your interest and based on your need, you can then decide whether or not it's something you want to learn more about from AgilePath. In the white paper title, we've been pretty aggressive with suggesting that a benefit of this approach is at least a 10 to 20x return on the investment of doing this type of a project, because we are that confident that we can quickly identify candidates that would drive a lot of hard dollar savings to your bottom line, as well as identifying candidates from a cloud migration perspective that would generate significant ROI just by harvesting infrastructure as a service savings. So we're very confident of those numbers. And again, if the legacy portfolio is consuming 70 to 80% of your IT budget, using 80-20 rule math, a few of these legacy apps killed off in an iterative fashion will go a long ways toward freeing up dollars to do innovation, to do IT strategy and strategic kind of investments, and to do more with the business. So those are some next steps to consider. So what we'd like to offer as a call to action is to have the attendees obviously read the materials, but you need to get a commitment to developing a portfolio modernization strategy and a commitment to doing this on an iterative basis. We advise looking at the portfolio twice a year, probably at the most, and maintaining that application portfolio's accuracy so you don't have to go and refresh it. We definitely suggest developing a cloud migration roadmap based on this portfolio analysis so that you can determine what things should move to cloud, but also that leads you to probably developing a cloud strategy and having a cloud implementation roadmap for either a private cloud or an overarching private-public hybrid cloud kind of a scenario. We urge you to think about that coarse-grained analysis technique and how that might work in your organization. Again, we've got the way we've done it that works, again, with the caveat that while there's a lot of universal questions in that 10 to 15 question set that we use for this coarse-grained portfolio analysis, there may be 2 to 5 that are unique to your particular enterprise. That said, this is something that can be done quickly, that can be done very effectively to identify the more obvious migration scenarios, and you could pull the trigger on those right away and start driving savings to the bottom line. Last, get executive sponsorship and support for this kind of an effort based on the who pays, who gains dichotomy. Clearly, it'd be great to have business sponsorship and business support for doing this. with the argument being IT savings are business savings, but minimally you certainly need IT executive support best. SOLARCloud is going to help reduce costs by rapidly and aggressively attacking the legacy portfolio first. Secondly, by attacking the legacy portfolio with the intent to migrate things to cloud. So that, I believe, is the last slide. Now we have time for questions. So let's go ahead and start the Q&A session. So here's one that we're seeing now, and that pertains to how long would it take to do a coarse-grained analysis of a portfolio with, say, 75 application capabilities in there. What kind of a range would we estimate for that, I suppose, is kind of where we'd go?
Looking at the coarse-grained analysis, you're probably looking at investing for each application a couple of hours at most for a business analyst to understand the application, apply the questions, and determine what the initial course of action is, what bin to put them in. So, again, the key is that you really want to look at things at a higher level. It's not a deep technology dive. So, again, rapid analysis to put things into buckets.
So I'd just like to thank everybody for dialing in today and remind you to watch your email inboxes because that companion white paper will be coming your way shortly. If you had a question that we weren't able to get to today or that you think of after the fact, you can always email us at info@agile-path.com. And if you're interested in learning more about AgilePath's capabilities and solutions, you can visit our website at agile-path.com. We had additional reference materials there, and pretty soon the slides from this webinar and the recording of this webinar will be up there as well. So thanks again for attending this AgilePath webinar, and everybody have a great day. Thank you.